Hey everyone, my name is Jenny Wren Stotrup of Gritty Birds Podcasting and the Gritty Birds Podcast, and this is Free Fridays. New skill. We're going to deep dive into things that help you be a better content director and a better podcaster and being better at working from home. And if you can, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube so that we can go ahead and change our URL. All right, thanks so much and enjoy the video. Hey everyone, this is Jenny Wren of Gritty Birds Podcasting, and I am so excited because we are on week 3 of the Free Friday series. And I know I mentioned the whole Fridays concept, but I started realizing I want to have conversations with people. So on Wednesdays, I'm going to be having live talks with friends of mine from around the world, and we're going to be talking about what the workshop series is going on for Fridays. So again, if you are on the feed, you can have the ability to make comments by going to streamyard.com/Facebook. So go ahead and do that. And if you are watching the YouTube replay of this and you would like to support, all you have to do is go ahead and push subscribe, because I'm trying to get to 100 followers so that I can be able to change the name and not have it be youtube.com/blah, blah, 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 blah. So before we get there, I'm going to bring on my amazing friend, Clay Groves. Clay and I met through Podcast Movement a couple years back, part of the Podcast Movement Max competition, and he is a winner. So when you saw that picture at the beginning, that's him with the belt, and he's a really good bud. And we're going to be talking today all about media. And so we're going to be talking about how to break through the media noise that is out there. As a person streaming, so the last few weeks we've been getting into streaming. So you're gonna love Clay. He's the best, and I'm gonna bring him in. Oh. Clay,
hey,
it's so nice to have you.
I finally made the big time. I finally got to be on your show, so here I am.
I finally have a show to have people on. I know that sounds weird, but I've been doing, being a narrative journalist. It means I do everything in post, and so this is fun. This is great.
I know that feeling. I do my show all in post as well. So it's live is hard. It's different. But I'm happy to be here. So
it's definitely really fun. And so when I was thinking about what to do a topic on this week, I thought about just talking to you first. And so then you brought up the idea of doing it on media noise, and as I'm going to be showing people how to kind of do press kits and sort of get into how to create that presence when you're having a show or when you're having a streaming show. That's going to be what the workshop is on Friday. But you have a really good perspective because you also have done a ton of pitching in media. You do have a show. You do have a live show as well. And you give workshops on this.
I do. Yeah. I do. Yeah. So I make I make the Fish Nerds podcast, and since doing this, I found that I can get my show mentioned in any news media outlet I want to. And I don't know how, first I didn't realize how I did it. And I spent some time analyzing it recently, and I figured out there actually is a pattern that I've been following without thinking about it. And so my biggest hit has been the New York Times, did a full page article on my side hustle. But of course, they talked about my podcast in it. And then just 2 days ago, Sunday, what days? I don't know what days anymore. But this past Sunday, my show got mentioned in the Union Leader, which is the largest paper in New Hampshire, because of some some community work I was doing. So it's not hard.
And your kids got on it too.
My kids got on it too. Yeah, which is that's part of the trick is I'm not pretty, so if you're pretty, you get an advantage. My kids are pretty, and that helps. So, I get the little advantage. I look like me, and so I'm just like this mountain furry man from New Hampshire. So I'm not that palatable.
Oh, come on! Yeah. But you make up in personality, right?
That's all I got. I'm not good at stuff. I can talk and laugh, and that's all I can do. So here I am.
Yeah, I mean, so when you are setting stuff up for your sites, what are some of the things that you recommend, to get even just that first thing out there when you're beginning? Because a lot of people right now are starting brand new. They're not even going into old things. They're saying okay, we're trying to figure out how to do this thing at all, and then they want to break through.
Okay, so when you start off, you start off making a podcast or starting off doing.
So I think in streams are because there's podcasts and there's streams, and then one thing I'm noticing, like for example, a lot of comedy people, like people who are in comedy and they're trying to figure out how to build a certain network around certain things, or trivia even is another one who's reached out a ton to me. Musicians doing lives, getting their shows established. A lot of them are doing it streaming wise, but a lot of them can also be setting it up as podcasts because not everyone does want to do the whole video thing. And there are so few resources right now. I mean, sorry, that sounds weird. It's hard to access a new microphone is what I mean. Like some of the gear is really.
You're not kidding. Because if you look at what all the late night TV hosts have been starting to do, they're doing these live streams now. And they can't even get good audio.
No,
like it baffles me. And so I have a friend who was a cephalopod expert. Cephalopods are squids and that sort of thing. And he just started making a podcast. But he came on my show last week, and he didn't have a microphone. He was using his onboard mic on his laptop. And I'm like, do you want people to listen? So the first thing you want to do is make sure whatever it is you're selling or you're talking about is worth talking about. So if you want people to tune in and stream your stuff, maybe you want to work first on getting some quality stuff together. But then I went on Amazon with him to try and help him shop for equipment. And Amazon sold out of reasonably priced good microphones because everyone's going online right now. So there is a challenge, uphill battle to try and even get started. So you're behind the eight ball if you don't have your equipment already. The other thing you could do, what I did is I didn't start podcasting immediately. I started out as a writer, a failed writer, for a bunch of magazines and newspapers. If you can find a local daily in your town, they're looking for content every single day. And so you can get your stuff in front of people if you start locally, even if you do a national content or worldwide content, because you are, even though you're local, you're part of your town. So even if you're doing a national show, your town still probably has a spot for you somewhere. So you can start locally and go from there. But there's a lot.
I mean, speaking of that, like right now, there's a lot of thought. I mean, most of like so for example, the paper I used to write for the Portland Mercury, they actually laid off like all of everyone.
Right. That's what happened around here.
And so I think a lot of time people are like, here's how you can monetize, here's how you can da-da-da-da-da. But right now, I think it's important to note sort of like if you are trying to get out in some of these medias, what's the etiquette going to be moving forward about hitting people up? Because a lot of these people need to have other jobs, you know.
Well, and they're not going to pay you.
Right. Yeah,
so
no money.
Even back when I first started, there was no money. I wasn't making. I did my first. I went and pitched to one magazine and newspaper, a series of writing. I was going to do a weekly column, and I said to them, "I'm going to give it to you, so you don't need to pay me for it. But you need to put it in there, and you need to mention at the time I was blogging, not podcasting, mention my blog and all that stuff. And so I was doing it first of all, for practice, because you don't get good at stuff right away. You don't get feedback right away. So right now, those dailies who fired those daily magazines and newspapers who fired all their reporters are still putting out content every single day. But now they're desperate for content that's not about viruses. So you have an opportunity now to get in there. You've got time, especially if you're like me and unemployed and you filed for unemployment, you're going to get paid anyway. You've got nothing but time. So contact them and say, this is my niche. Here's how I can localize it, make it beneficial to your paper. Maybe someday I want money, but right now, let's get the information to people. Let's content creation, and then worry about monetizing later. Because if you're brand new, you're not ready anyway. Your quality isn't going to be there unless you're coming off of something where you're already well known. But you need practice. So
I did media partnerships at the beginning too. Yeah. So when the show launched, it launched with Vortex Music Magazine here in Portland. And I worked for a second in the development with Portland Radio Project. And then the second year, I ended up joining up with X-Ray FM. And all of those were I didn't get paid for any of that at all. So, and I think at a certain point, I started getting paid for some side jobs. Like I had a quarterly that I wrote for Vortex, and I was writing for the Mercury. So, but those are like huge paying jobs, even when they are. Like I have a good friend and he writes for some of the bigger publications. And I was, I asked him the number that you get paid for even like Rolling Stone. It's not huge numbers. So I find that a lot of it, if I do get paid for writing, sometimes it's more when it comes down to the corporate end of stuff where somebody needs bios or things like that. But it was really helpful for me to get initial press and comments from the start, and also to have the air of legitimacy that allowed the show to get better interviews and just the resource growth, because having an editor and having someone give that feedback was really huge. And so that was sort of where, knowing sponsorship, because I'd worked in media sponsorship at that time for the PDX Talk Now, after I kind of stepped away from, after I put on my record, was putting on festivals, because I'd had a festival called Noosa Soul Festival, and then that ended up being a soul festival we didn't continue past 1 year. And it was like I was getting other people onto the shows and kind of contacting and reaching out to people and getting sponsors. But none of it was paid, but it was, you could get your name there, or you could have a logo as an advertisement. And those, you can have it on a page, and you just have that presence there. But when you have it on the bottom of your page, of your email, and they can go and see where that is, that they can go to that spot in that page on that legitimate place, it really brought a lot of legitimacy to me when I was bringing on clients, because they were able to look at the fact that, I really am a published writer on several different magazines, and like that there's a level of trust there.
Right. And if you're writing for all these people, or magazines or whoever, you have that legitimacy, like you said, but also you have Google juice, because now people are like, who is Jenny Wren? Let me Google her. Oh, she wrote for this Portland magazine. Or if you Google me, you're going to see, you're going to see 150 articles published in 2 different magazines, and all in a series. And so all of a sudden, like, okay, he's a real human who does things. And that helps you get that next level of guest on your show or whatever. I am going to tell you about monetization. I'll tell you how to make the money on those too, if you want to hear it. The way I did it was I was writing a weekly series called Catch 'em All. It was a quest to catch and eat every kind. I do fishing stuff, to catch and eat every freshwater fish in the state of New Hampshire. It was really an exploration of fishing culture, and it was a kind of a creative writing experience. And it got really, really popular. And maybe a year into it, after writing weekly for 2 magazines, the same article from both magazines, it was popular. They were getting feedback from it. I went in and I talked to the editors, and I said, "Do you like what we're doing?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you like it enough now where you're willing to pay for it?" So I gave them a year for free. And then they started paying me for it. And then I was happier, because then I felt valued a little bit differently. Yeah. But then the pressure kind of ramped up too.
I think the pressure is something that you have to recognize. And I think that was sort of where I started stepping away from it sometimes, because if I didn't have an idea, if I wasn't really pushed to write, it wasn't something I wanted to do weekly. And I liked and that was even the same with the radio station. Like, it was like so much work. I would spend 20 to 25 hours a week not getting paid producing this narrative show. And it meant that eventually I had to take a day job. And if I took a day job, just the numbers with the show were not enough for me to like legitimately be able to move it forward. But it was enough of a showcase that when I figured out that next transition, it was there. And I think that it's in your, whatever your shows are, you need to recognize kind of what your goals are. And those goals can change a lot. So, like, for example, like I don't put my show out as much, but if you come back to what you were saying about like what people need, like I was doing some streams earlier. I was just trying to find my voice starting in November, because I was like, I'm going to do these things, but it was so plotted out that I found that it was extra work for me. It was taking away from the work that I was doing for clients. It was, Larry says getting paid here. I can click it. This is here. Yeah, you can only get paid with exposure bucks for so long. So,
well, Larry's right, because you can die from exposure. That's why it's important you go back and you pitch it. Do you like what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Is it worth money to you now? And don't be afraid to stop writing for that company after you've given them a little bit. Especially right now is your opportunity to get in there and start. So Larry's right on the money. I like Larry.
The money. Larry too. Here, say hi. Say, hey, Amani. Okay.
Hi, Amani.
So yeah, but I want to kind of part of that too is though when you're setting up that stuff that you're getting going in the beginning,
Mhm.
you kind of want to think about who your audience is because if you're not getting any numbers or people aren't interested in being a part of it, or if it's not getting out there, like what's the point? And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that want to think about it. So when this series came up, all of a sudden it was just like my brain made sense all of a sudden on it.
Mhm.
And it was like at first I was putting it together and I'm like, I had this one vision, but I allowed it to shift. And when I realized that I could like talk to other people, it was like, oh, this is way more fun and accessible for me to do. Because I can't, I don't want to be just a talking head. I want to talk to my friends.
Yeah, it's so much fun. So I lost track of my brain here for a second.
So we were talking about money. So like if you have
Yeah.
that goal, then and if you know where you're willing to part, then you're able to move on to the next project.
Well, so if you look at it in terms of like any business you might run. So I run a fishing guided service, right? And you kind of like I don't make profit on that business. I'm 3 years in. The only pay I take out of that is my tips, but everything else goes right back into the business. So essentially, I'm doing a lot of work as I build up an audience or build up a clientele. It's the same thing with getting into the media. Sometimes you feel like you're working for nothing, but you're building into something, and then eventually you're going to turn that corner and start asking for money. So I went from writing for free for about a year for these two companies to then being paid for it. Again, not being paid a lot because it's writing, and somehow people don't value the effort of that. And then I won a book pitching contest called Pitchapalooza, where you get 1 minute to sell your book idea. It's like an American Idol book pitching contest, and I got an editor and a agent in New York City who was going to sell my book project, and we worked with him for quite a long time and failed to sell the book to anybody. And then I launched the podcast, and then I really lost money for a long time. So because no one pays you to podcast when you're brand new at it, but it comes. But it's fun, and it's really fun to see your stuff published. But after getting published a lot, then I was able to go to public radio and talk to them about after I learned how to record and edit, learn how to sell news articles to public radio. And they pay like $700 for a 4-minute news story. So if you want to know what they pay, that's what they pay, which is pretty darn good. But they don't use most of what you give them. They have what's called a kill fee. So if you do a story that's no good, they will kill it, and they'll pay you not to ever talk about it again. So I've been paid more to kill stories than I have gotten my stories on air. You get paid to fail. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there are worse things to get paid for.
I know. I've been paid not paid to fail so many times. Being paid to fail is terrific. Although it's a lot of work. 4-minute story for public radio probably is 16 hours of work.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have actually never pitched to public radio. I've just tried to get jobs at public radio.
Yeah,
but
I've tried that too.
It's like, but it comes to some of that same concept of like, if I don't have the right story, like for me to go and say, I'm going to talk to you guys all about podcasting is just a weird kind of thing. So I found that, trying to think about what those topics are. So like lately I was doing a lot about the organizational systems I use in the fall, and I got a lot of speaking gigs from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then lately I've been starting to kind of transition more into like the how are we doing streaming, because I've been doing this for like 5 years. And then like this new part is everyone always asks me about media and sponsorship. So I was like, okay, let's get into some of the, the pieces behind it. And so that's going to be kind of fun to step in this month, because I've never talked about it before. Really, I always put that one to the side and kind of leave it alone. I'm like, we're just going to talk about audio.
Right. Well, audio is easier. The problem with talking about sponsorship and money is no one's ever specific enough. And so like every podcast or every stream I've ever watched anyone talking about monetizing their podcast or making money on their podcast, they don't actually tell you the numbers. And I think that's the hardest thing, because no one knows where to start. The standards there's no standard that makes sense for people. So it's really, really hard. Hey, Joe Pardo just joined the group.
Oh, yay. Joe.
Yes.
Okay, go in the comments.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Joe's here for me, not you, Clay.
I don't blame him. He's just, that's because I did that to him the other day.
we that's funny. We had a fun chat last Wednesday. Super Joe Pardo. Yeah. So one thing I want to find for Joe, whenever you see him, it's like the Joe Pardo or Super Joe Pardo, and having like getting a little magnet or sticker that like where you have the. So every time we're at a conference, we can just add it to it on the front.
You should have it. Yeah, there's only a few. There's only a few of these in the world. I think there's the Super Joe Pardo and like the Dave Jackson. I think that's all I can think of. So you get a couple of those around here and there.
Yeah. For those of you who aren't in our podcasting world, these are some of our friends, just for context.
They're kind of like podcast heroes. Oh, and Andrew Wang is here. Oh my gosh.
So fun. Yeah. I mean, like, I think if there's anyone out there who isn't, like, I guess this is sort of like what this little world is, you get to know these people, these conferences, and then we talk to each other online. And now it's funny because everyone else is now also talking online. So it's like, okay.
This is the only social I get now. Is I spend all day on the computer talking to people. So
last night was really fun because we did a table reading of Forrest Gump. We made it through the first half. I played Jenny. It was super fun. It was in a private group, but it was a blast because you can just get these scripts. Like they're free online.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fun. We're getting all the big names, Larry. Yeah.
Well, Larry, you're one of them. So
well, Larry, you are. Yeah. No, it's kind of funny because it's like it hasn't taken much to try to figure out how to populate the series because they're just really great people. And I think that when you think about also when you're thinking about having your show, think about having people that you like and because it doesn't necessarily have to be all the big names. And often like the most traffic I get are people that I know already because there's just that rapport and the community knows those people too. So it's kind of fun to be able to say, okay, like it doesn't have to be the most exciting giant name because they're not going to be sharing it too. So
yeah, but it's fun and fun attracts people. And so if you're having a good time, then they're going to have a good time too. So that makes a very, very big difference in it. So getting back to talking media.
Yeah.
So focus on.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, but I do think that is part of it. So like if you're setting up sort of what you want your show to be, how to get it to the media and where to do any of that, you do want to kind of think about like, what is the thing that's going to work for you? Who is the person you're going to have rapport to and etc. Right? I think it's he puts what's in a name, so like even your name, if you think about the media for the media. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Yeah. I mean, how did you come up with the Fish Nerds? Tell me about that.
So we weren't called the Fish Nerds at first. We actually, my email is actually, we were actually called, we had a terrible website. It was called Catch 'em All, catch-m-all.com. It was a quest to catch all the fish in New Hampshire, which we thought was clever. And then everyone confused it with Pokemon. After failing to sell our book, our agent said, have you thought about launching a podcast? Because then you can reach a whole bunch of people and you'll be able to sell your book better. And we fired him and then launched a podcast. And then we changed our name to Fish Nerds because, first of all, nobody owned the domain, which was thanks, Brent. No one owned the domain fishnerds.com, which surprised the hell out of me because it was a very popular term in the fishing world. If you were a collector of fishes, you were called a fish nerd. And so we bought the domain, spent $9 on it, launched the podcast, and ditched everything that had.
I lost you.
Our logo, if you want to go really nerdy on this, the orange color is taken from a scan of the scale of the northern red-bellied dace, which is the smallest fish in New Hampshire. That's the color orange, and the yellow, we liked yellow. And the two fishermen in our silhouette in the logo are Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. We found a picture of them fishing and we grabbed their silhouette and stuck it in there. And by the way, I'm not a sports fan. I just liked how it looked.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was always kind of curious about that. That's good.
Yeah. And then my partner, Dave Kellum, at the time, he and I had really good rapport, and we were able to get our show. One of the biggest things we did our first year into the show is Boston Public Radio did an event called the Rise of the Podcast. And this was back in 2013. And they invited Carrie from PRX. She's the president of PRX. They distribute This American Life and all that. And the president of WRKO Radio, which does all the big radio shows, and the Fish Nerds talk about where podcasting is coming and where it is going. And so you had like two really big names in the industry and then two guys talking about fish. And of course we owned the house. We did a much funnier presentation than anybody else did. And my favorite thing is during the Q&A afterwards, is a roundtable discussion, and it's front of there's like 300 people in the audience. They started talking numbers. So Carrie from PRX, I've told the story a few times, I forget why I told it, but Carrie from PRX is talking about This American Life and how they're getting 50 million downloads per episode. And she looks over at me and she goes, "Now, Fish Nerd, you guys are a much smaller show. What are your numbers like?" And I started laughing really hard. And at the time, we were getting 80 downloads an episode. This is back when we
Oh my
first launched.
gosh,
But we
yeah.
were already being
But,
featured
like
on Boston Public Radio. So your audience doesn't know how much other audience they are. So you treat your audience like they're part of a big group, because someday they might be. So don't, who cares if it's 80 or 3,000 or whatever? They all have value. But no one knew. But that's why we couldn't monetize right away either. And she's, when you get to 50,000, give me a call. You can come on PRX.
I mean, I've had my show now for 5 years, and I don't have an episode that goes over 500 downloads.
Well,
But I had partnerships from the very beginning.
yeah. Well, all you can do is
So
ask, right?
yeah, all you can do is ask and kind of figure that out. I mean, I don't know what my listenership, of course, was with radio, and that was one of the challenges when I went to radio.
Hmm.
So like, there's no way to really know what that would be, but it was something that was like, okay, well, because it was pretty niche, people had
Hmm.
value for it. And there is a lot when you think about, media sponsorship is there's a lot of ways you can monetize, and we're not heading into monetization. We're talking more the media side.
Hmm.
But if you have something that's super relevant to the time, it totally numbers don't tell the whole story
They
exactly.
don't, but they sure
Right.
are nice when they come.
But it doesn't have to be big numbers, it's about relationships. And the
That's right.
relationships is actually so much.
It's
Like,
huge.
it was that you got those initial relationships. I had those initial relationships.
Hmm.
I had gotten those relationships because when I moved to Seattle, I made relationships. And then when I had to move to Portland, I continued those relationships based on the people in Seattle who introduced me to people in Portland. And then, you also take a look at opportunities. So, like, I met all of you guys because when I left teaching and I was like, okay, I'm done with it. And I went to the radio station and I just joined the radio station and I got a grant to go to Podcast Movement. And then that relationship is like how I know all of you guys, is I kept building them and reaching out to people and coming back to it. And those things wouldn't have happened if that hadn't been the case, because Jared had invited me to do PMX, and that's how I know you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Jared also invited me to do PMX, and
He's great.
how can I do something different than anybody else? And for those who don't know, PMX was like Podcast Movement's.
Like a TED Talk.
Yeah, that was
Or
their answer to the
storytelling.
TED. Yeah, it was the TED Talk for podcasters, but not sponsored by TED. So whoever that guy is, see you, Joe. Whoever that guy is. So, and it was like 10 of us. So the Andrew Wang was there too. And he played the ukulele. You did live music. Also, great presentation. And I played Eel of Fortune.
My
where I spun
first
a big
clients
wheel,
did a talk.
so.
That's how I met them.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That's how I got
cool.
Lady Tech Charmers. Like,
No
afterward, they're like,
kidding.
hey, we need an editor. And I was like, I've decided that I'm going to stop just applying for NPR jobs and I'm just going to edit for other people.
Why not?
It didn't occur to me to do that. Even though I had done that on a consulting basis for a few years, I just didn't, I don't know, compute.
But anyway, we all did this great big talk. It was, I think everyone did 10 minutes. Everyone was amazing. It was a lot of fun. I sat through every single talk because I want people to sit through mine.
Yeah.
But I think they stopped doing those too because the audience wasn't showing up. People weren't going for it.
The ones that really took off were the 5-minute or is it called Spark, or I forget what it was called, but those ones really took off because it was a really concise idea. And I hit that last year and that was amazing. Because I think we also kind of to think about that, it doesn't always work. So like PMX was not a thing that worked, but then but the other thing was the one that Eric Rosen he puts on, and it's you can pivot, and pivot's a word that everyone keeps using, and I think I've used it in every single one of these streams. But when you're thinking about like your media strategy too, you can pivot. So if
Mm-hmm.
something pops up and all of a sudden you're like, "Ooh, this is a Fred talk, interesting," it's you have the ability to say, "Okay." All of a sudden, something can totally work, and you can just blast off and do it. If it's hitting people and it's working, go for it and keep going
Yeah.
for it until it doesn't, and then but keep your eye on the pulse
Yeah. Well, it
to
also
be able
depends.
to know what the media needs.
Yeah, it also depends what your goal is for media. Is your goal to get mentioned in the media, get paid to produce media,
Ignite.
or Ignite Talks?
Yeah, it was the Ignite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what is your goal for the media? Like for me, mostly I want to get mentioned.
Armand, a big one.
I want people to know I exist. And so what I do is I do all the things that might get me in. The most common thing I do to get in the media is to do something for the community. So a fundraising event.
Yeah.
Last week I started a Facebook group for barter and swap in my community, and it got into all kinds of newspapers around here, and every single one of them mentioned my podcast. So it all depends on what it is you want to do with the media, and I think setting those goals are going to help you get to those next steps. Because right now we're kind of talking about a lot of things at one time.
Yeah.
But if you're not focused on what is your goal,
right,
get mentioned or get your own show or get your become a writer. All those are different paths, and they all work, but you have to know what you want to go for.
Right. Totally. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Damona Hoffman's been doing a talk on this as well. That's been interesting. She's a dating expert. And so like she'll notice huge peaks in her show.
You say a dating expert?
Yeah. She's not me. She is.
I was going to say, I'd be the worst.
I'm terrible.
I hate dating so much.
And now it's even worse. Like I thought every time I feel like I'm getting closer to it. Like I was, I was dating, and but now I'm not, because
well, now you can't.
no, it's challenging when you have communication barriers and you can't see each other. So or talk, if a person's not into a phone, then what do you do? So Larry told his wife, "I'm in it for the groupies."
Yeah. How's that working out, Larry?
It's so funny.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, if we see the stream, I've met a lot of guys. You guys are all married with my buddies.
Yeah. That's why we're so comfortable. We're like, yeah, we're married. We don't care. We're like,
oh my gosh, that's so funny. But yeah, she'll notice big spikes in her show when they mention it, because her name will come up on it, and she can mark the dates of her listenership that go up, because at the end of the day, some of it then converts from listeners to better sponsorships, and then also to like your money clients, so the people who are coming in for you. But I've noticed the same thing with events. So like when the times I've gotten media, most media were around my record release, around the first show that I ever put on in Portland was a benefit for the Jeremy Wilson Foundation, which raises funds for people who need healthcare. So there's a ton of, like, right now, Jeremy Wilson Foundation, you should go check out. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff, and they're do some interesting media. They're also creating interesting media, and to get those peaks, because it brings back down to, again, what is your goal? So if your goal is to be like, I want to be a princess, I don't really know what to say about that. Meghan Markle doesn't look like she's having a great time right now. So I don't want that. No. But
I mean, goals is, when I say goals, I mean goals.
Yeah.
We're talking about media. Your goal in the media, get
Right.
mentioned, have a show, get on a show.
Yeah.
They all have their own path. We wanted to get on. One of our first goals was get on to New Hampshire Public Radio, and so we would tweet every time they did a story about fish. We would tweet at the producers what they got wrong.
Oh my God, that's so smart.
Yep. If you had a Fishner on the story, you would have got it right. Here's where you were wrong on that.
Oh man.
When we wanted to get on Boston Public Radio, I don't know how they found us. One day they just invite us to come down, and we had to follow Joe Biden. He walks out, we walk in. And so you never know. We're sitting in the green room, and Boston Public Radio does all politics all the time, and then once in a while they have the fish nerds come in.
That is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it's really bizarre. But we just tweet at people and make jokes and laugh, and then when you do get an opportunity to be in the media, whatever it happens to be, whether it's writing, whether it's audio, video, bring your best. Go in there, and when they ask you a question, don't just have a yes or no answer, but have a robust answer. If you're funny, you better be funny. If you say your show is funny, if you're interesting, you better be interesting. So you just bring your good stuff, because they won't be interested in kind of having you back again, and you won't grow your audience if you're not who you are, and it's way easier if you don't pretend to be something you're not, because
Right.
you can't fake it that long.
You can only fake it so long. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Mhm.
What I guess when you're setting your goals, I guess this is thing I'm curious on. Do you like have these planning sessions? Or these things that are calculated, or you're just like, we want to do this? Like, is there a wall somewhere that has like your
It's
goals?
interesting. I have a group on Facebook called the Secret Society of Fish Nerds, which you can't join. It's
I'm
got
not.
about 9 people who are really deep
Oh,
into my
really?
show. Some of them were fans. Some of them were original like idea people when we first started the podcast, and some of them have never listened to a podcast in their life, but they have like PhDs in fisheries biology and that sort of thing. And so what I do is I go into that think tank, and we call it think tank. Yeah, I go in there and I will drop like, hey, I need to get into, I'm going to get on public radio this next week. What are people talking about where you are? People are all over the place. So I have
Ooh.
people in Australia on that group, in England on that group, and so then that helps me generate the ideas, and then we start, tweeting at. Well, we might game it a little bit because there's only one at Fish Nerds on Twitter, but I have lots of people who will like retweet for me and think something is a bigger deal than it is, and kind of help get the attention of the reporters who maybe want to do a story on your
Really?
thing.
You
Yeah.
have a conspiracy theory group that helps promote you because you're wonderful?
Well, they're not. They're just they like what we do, and they just want to help. And so
No, that's great.
yeah, it's only about 9 people. Secret Society of Fish Nerds, we call them, and they just really like hardcore fans of the concept of the
That's
show.
cool.
Yeah,
That
and they
yeah.
generate ideas
I
and
had that
content.
same situation, but they all helped me transcribe for, like, a year because
Gross.
I know, I felt so bad, I didn't know how else to get them to what else to have to do at the time,
Yeah.
and now I'm like, "Man," well, it was, like, the one thing I really, really needed, and,
Mhm.
looking back, I like that because that's amazing, like, what can they do?
All right, so Blake, just keep an
Oh,
idea.
Blake Utley. Yeah, so Blake Utley is one of my, I've known
Yeah.
him since, like, middle school, and he is a coach and, from back in Iowa. So he would recommend each person creating a personal MVP. Oh, I love that. That is really, really good. Mission, vision, principles to have quarterly goals. Yes, I totally am on board for all of that from Brian Kane's work. So yeah, I do very similarly. I have kind of like sort of different mapped things. One of the ones I really like is like the Panda Planner too, because it'll have like what are your goals for a period of time. Then I also use the Start Planner, where you're looking at like far term out and like things that are more initial, and sort of like having those goals where you're just shooting for the moon too are really fun to have because if make them big, like who else is gonna like if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but at least you said it out loud,
Yeah, okay, to be
right?
honest, my people in my society of fish nerds, have a lot loftier goals than I do. I rarely beyond 2 weeks out at anything I plan for the
Yeah.
fish nerds. It's usually like I need to get in the paper next week because my ego needs it, and then we come up with something that will work. But it's pretty easy. I mean, like they need to fill the papers every day, and right now the media is cloudy with noise with the COVID-19 stuff. They're dying for anything positive. And if you are doing something positive, tell them.
Yeah.
Just let them know. Say, hey, I'm doing something cool. That's
Yeah.
friendly and warm and happy.
I would also say is don't be afraid to pitch. I think for the
Yeah.
last couple of years, I really haven't wanted to be out in the media. Like this show is really fun for me to finally be like, "Hey guys,"
Hmm.
because I think there was a part of me that just didn't quite feel comfortable for a while, and now I'm just like, "Let's do it." I'm having a blast,
Hmm.
and And so, but I find that you have to know where to reach out to. So, like, I made the mistake for a couple weeks of trying to get my voice out to some of the women's communities and some of the Facebook forums. And they're just that's not like a really great place, but Facebook is still my place because I have like such a huge network.
Hmm.
But a lot of it is like one of the things that I did when I first got media was not got media, sorry, was getting media was I would find a person, we'd have a contact and we'd get like an intro, or someone would send me their mailing list of who they have for the current context because the contacts change a lot. So one of the challenges I hit was even I'm not as into shows and I used to go out to shows like every night when I was the most active in the Portland scene. And when that switched, I didn't know how it was harder for me to do writing for it. So it didn't really make sense for me to write about like up and comings anymore or like write what's going
Hmm.
on in records because it wasn't my loop anymore. And but when I was doing that, it's like I knew who to reach out to. You know, I made my press release and I'd send it out, but then I'd follow up personally with them and then just, have some of that content going out anyway so that they would be able to see it. But I also gave them all those resources so they wouldn't have to ask too many questions. So like there are like a lot of sites, and Demona showed this one too. I need to have her on as well, where you can see what people are looking for, like you mentioned, and also see who's like accepting bids kind of on
Hmm.
certain pieces of it. And yeah, but you're right about right now. That's a good comment about what's the hot button thing, what's fun. So not
Yeah,
yeah.
and to give you a little more insight, so I just got fired from a radio station because of this stupid virus that everyone's that's taken off all of our fun, and I got fired because the ad revenue stopped coming in. So we're obviously, if your station's all funded through restaurants and bars and resorts, you're gone. But I did work in the newsroom as well and help them write the news every day. And here's a little trick: when you write your news release, make the first paragraph a 15-second news story all by itself, a standalone story.
Yep.
They can, in that first paragraph, if they could cut and paste that into their news read,
Hmm.
you're going to get in a lot easier if they don't have to do any work.
Totally.
Because they get in there at 5 in the morning for a 5:15 live read of the news. So they're grabbing from the AP and other places who already do this. They have the 1 minute news stories or 15-second news stories. They have a list of them. And if you're sending them your own story and they have to read 4 or 5 paragraphs, unless you get a really motivated news person who really wants to spend time with your unknown person's story, they're not going to do it. So make it so it's easy for them.
Hmm.
Make it easy.
That's good. So Friday's workshop is actually kind of setting up those media kits, and I'll get into some of those.
Perfect.
I have press releases I'll kind of show you guys too with that same concept. So like if you're watching this in post, and if you can go to that next video, or if you're here and you can see that on Friday, I'll be able to kind of show you what he's talking about a little too. And
Yeah, perfect.
and it's same with that's like the header. So like if you are when you're thinking about your media kit, the same concept. Like so I have a just a Dropbox paper with that has all of my things in it. So it has like a, my short bio, it has my long bio, it
Hmm.
has like 4 photos in it. It's got a couple of videos if somebody wants to tag it so that they can just go ahead and download it and they don't have to think too much about it.
Yeah.
You don't have to make anything up, and you can keep that somewhat relevant and somewhat easy, but just make it simple. Make it so that they don't have to search too much
Well,
because
words are
if
your
you
enemy.
simplify their life, yeah,
Yeah,
words are your enemy.
they are.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many times have I got pitched like 10 paragraphs? Can I come on your show? Here's what I've done. And I'm like, oh, no. I,
yeah.
I don't even know where to start. Like, give me something relevant. Give me something fast. Give me something I can bite into right away. If I like the taste, I'm going to go deeper and read more of it. But if I have to sort through your garbage, um, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah, and know a little bit about whatever you're getting into, and I think we see that in the podcasting world because you can think of just being on podcasts as media where it's like, I keep getting pitched, and you're like and the people are not having any concept of what they're getting themselves into and then are just wasting everyone's time. And one question I always see in places, I need to go back to comments, is like, why is how do you reply to everyone who like sent you a request? I'm like, heck no. I get
I
like
try.
I just get so many a day, partly from publicists for music, just because of what I, used to do. And I don't, I know that a lot of those are mass. Some publicists will go ahead and do things by person. So I have done some publicity, and PR was one that for a while I was like, I'm going to become a publicist, and then I like worked in media for a couple of years doing sponsorship and doing some like PR projects. And like I was pretty good at it, but it was definitely not something I wanted to keep on doing because I did pitching for podcasts too, and that was like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and it was not that much fun.
No, it's
No,
hard. And it's really hard to pitch someone else's stuff if you don't have the heart for it.
right?
It's a real challenge. I had my most recently on a show I recorded the other night, which I'm not releasing. I had a guy who, not guy, had an organization here in New Hampshire. We have what's called the Free State Project, which is a libertarian project where they're trying to, Larry, I'll get to your question on One Sheets in a second. But they had a guy coming in they're trying to get the whole state to go libertarian, which I don't know much about, but cool. But he wanted to talk about fishing. The guy their spokesperson, after sending me like 30 emails, I finally agreed to have him on the show. Their spokesperson couldn't speak on the topic. So they
Really?
hassled me. They finally get a chance. Yes, let's do this.
Huh.
And the person they gave me could not make a sentence.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. He had to borrow a USB microphone. It was a Blue Yeti. He didn't know how to dial the settings on it. He sounded like he was in a big empty hallway. And the content wasn't good enough to overcome the audio quality. So I'm not releasing it because it wasn't good enough and he wasn't interesting to me. I found him to be dull and boring. So he had an opportunity to reach. I mean, I don't have my episodes get between 1,500 and 3,000 listens per episode, per month, that took me 8 years to get to that point. But to reach some people, maybe grow his audience. But man, I can't feed that to my ear holes of my people I like because it wasn't good enough. So when you get a chance, make it good.
Yeah, no, but that is so much is you can be a talking head on something and be like deathly boring, or you can just be like, I want someone to do this, but if you don't know your topic really, that's hard to keep moving
real
forward.
challenging.
Yeah.
Don't claim you're an expert.
No.
And then not be an expert,
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to just say the words, "Hi, I'm an expert," and not be, I guess, is a thought.
Well,
and there's so many people that are what? Oh,
go ahead.
No, you say yours.
Oh, we all do that from time to time. We're all Facebook experts, right? And then we get 3 sentences in and we realize that we're over our heads and whatever conversation we're having, we can delete those. But when you're on someone else's show, you really got to bring it. So
yeah, the unpublished episodes. I have I have a ton of unpublished episodes. I need to publish a lot of them. Some of them were, but yeah, some of them I have to figure out the way to package them to make them work. Because if it's not always easy when I'm, they don't always work. And some people just are a little dry, and you have to figure out how to get to know them, or there has to be a route in if it's a subject you need to cover. But that's a hard one. That can be a hard one, but you have to make that call because you like. Hi, Reba. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Yes, Reba, I would love to have you on for some of these because you have a really special way of bringing community together, which is amazing. She has a really fantastic show. Why am I forgetting the name? Reba, help me. Oh my God. It's a sex positive storytelling event that happens live monthly in Portland. It's been going on for several years. It's really cool. But she's a story coach.
Awesome.
So she's a story coach. So I did at least one storytelling event, but she was also a parent when I was of a student that I had when I was a teacher. So that's kind of fun. So I probably want to circle the Mystery Box show. Yeah, it's a really great show. So go check out the Mystery Box. They have a really great YouTube channel also that you can see a lot of these talks on. If you are here on YouTube, I'll add that into the comments. Okay. Oh, River says hi. Hi, River. Okay, coming back, let's move back up to Larry's question, which was his thought on One Sheets. And that is something I'm going to show you kind of how they can look at them on Friday as well.
Well, before you get into it, I want you to tell people who don't know what a one sheet is.
Yes. So a one sheet, and I did these when I was working in podcast pushing. So like if I had a guest that I had to get on so many shows in a month, and we would have the pitch, but then we'd also include a PDF that had a picture of the person, what they could talk about, a really short bio, and also a couple things that they like to be asked as questions. And it's sort of a simplicity page. that's one way of doing a one sheet. For music, it's very similar to that, where you have your one sheet and it's like more digital, and it's your press kit, similar concept, and it has just a couple episodes you've been on, like, or a couple recordings, a couple like highlights of who you are, that just give a like, hi, I'm this is who I am, and this is why I'm important for you to talk to.
Right.
So that's kind of
And in that same vein, on that first page, if you were breaking into the media and you've got any good media,
mhm,
then that's an opportunity to say as seen on or heard on.
right,
Like I just updated mine and now it says as seen in the New York Times,
right.
because that gives you that street cred, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, and even though it's, not anyone read it, but it's, it felt good to be there.
yeah,
So,
totally.
so use that media to your advantage. My one sheet is 2 pages long.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to do this. So
R
I'm learning.
I would say I don't have one right now. I have an old one, and now I'm updating it, and I use Canva,
Hmm.
and so I've had that for a few years. I think I made that one 5 years ago. And it's But it also has, some of them have your stats too.
Yes.
So if you're looking back, we're talking about media sponsorship, or where you're trying to get back in the money side of things, that's also going to be like, how many followers do you have? Like, how many, unique listens do you have over what period of time? And that's a little deeper side of it, but that's like going to be your more of your media press kit too, and also your sponsorship kit.
Yeah.
So you can I always like having the idea for one sheets. If you were looking for getting in media, but also if you're starting to look towards sponsorship, I think it becomes even more important in sponsorship than it does for getting media. Just because it's kind of like, you look at a resume, but are you always looking at a resume if you're looking for a topic when you're looking for news?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it would just, and you got to hit it just right too, with the right person, the right eyes, the right time,
Yeah,
because people look at 100 of these things and notice you, and all of a sudden the thing you have is the thing they want that day, and if you get them
right.
just right, if your timing is good, it works well for you. But it's all timing. I mean, it's really,
Yeah.
do people want to read what you wrote in
Yeah.
your one page, and is it too wordy, or is it the imagery work for you, or whatever it is. I'm a big fan of charts. I'm a big fan of graphs, visual
Mhm.
stuff on that one sheet, so it's not just one sheet of words. Um,
Yeah. And think
yeah.
about your brand colors.
Hmm.
That's a huge one. And that was a takeaway from, something that when we were talking to the
Brand colors.
podcast editors. Yeah, exactly. And like, you
Yeah.
can see in my background here, my colors are for Gritty Birds are this kind of reddish and this greenish. And so I want to have those there because that's my colors. And I even look into my closet and I'm like, oh God, this really is. But I almost never wear red. That's funny, but it's kind of this pinkish. So Reba always has trouble getting media. What
Mm.
does the media want? Right, for sponsorship,
Ah.
yeah. So what does the
Well,
media want?
so that's so Reba. What are you nerdy about? Right. That's what they want. They want
Yeah,
someone who's nichey and not like. So if you do, and Reba, I know you do a specific show, but if you do, like, a lot of
yeah,
people do podcasts and they do a show that's like, my show is about stuff and two guys sitting around talking. No one cares. The media is not interested in it. Reba, everyone wants to talk about sex, all the time. And so you're the expert now. That's your niche. You're a sex nerd, right? So, which makes you my best friend because I love that idea. Um, but that's what they want to talk about. So now, how does that relate to what's
mhm.
happening in the world around us? That's what they want to talk about.
So
You're the expert on
Reba's
sex. Bring it to them.
Speaking of, I would, if I were you, and if I were to make a pitch, and Demona gives a really great workshop on this one. So when I say that, I'm saying this wasn't my idea. It is where you go on and make a list of something, but like, I would pitch them about right now, because the sex workers are not getting access to unemployment funds, and I think that might be something for you to think about it, because it is, what outlets you might be able to reach out to even locally, because of kind of some of those incidences and how that affects people, because you have a special ability in what you do to humanize all of that and make it not as taboo. That's the whole portion. So if I were you, that would be what I do right now. So
Absolutely,
yeah,
but also don't forget the other side of it too. So you have that story about, and of course that we all well, I do. Everyone should get paid, including sex workers. But also remember that right now, I know for sure, every media outlet's looking for something interesting, funny, or heartwarming. And so, Reba, you could bring that to them as well. You can talk about how people are dating over using Zoom, or how people
Yeah.
are continuing relationships, keep them going. How
Damona
people,
was on All
yeah,
Things Considered on Friday night.
no
Yeah,
way,
I know. I was really nerding on that one because I've been doing a lot of consulting for her
yeah.
lately, and so I was just like, "Yay!" Because yeah. Anyway, that's the Fresh Books podcast. And to answer Larry's earlier, yeah, if you want to chat more, you can always just set up something over at my consult. Okay, but yeah, it was kind of cool. Yeah, like there's definitely room for having those conversations if they know that you exist.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
But be your own nerd. Be what you do, your thing in the context of real life, what's happening right now. And again,
right.
doing something positive for the community will almost always get you a mention in the paper. So right now there's a lot of need in the community. So
Yeah.
even if it's off topic for your niche, you still are your niche. So like I've done I make a Fish Nerds podcast. I've done breast cancer awareness months on my show where I went pink for a month. I got rid of my orange logo, went pink. I did press conferences on top of mountains, and the media
Oh
showed
yeah,
up,
that was cool.
and which is bizarre, but they
Yeah.
show up because you're doing something good for the community, and that still gets your show mentioned, but also gives you that kind of like, hey, I did something good for somebody feeling, which is
Yeah.
worth a whole lot of money. And if you're talking about sex, that might get you laid too, because you didn't for me because I've been married too long, but for other people, that will totally work for you.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got like flushed. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
god.
Well, we were talking about sex. I had
We were,
to.
yeah. Uh, right now, I will say to come back around to like where to find those people
Hmm.
because some of them have been laid off. The way that I usually find people, or what I recommend, or when I was doing that a lot, is get the most recent version of their pages. So if the paper's still out, like go to like see who's writing right now,
Right.
like
Who didn't
this
get
week.
fired?
Not
Yeah.
who was writing 3 weeks ago. Like you can go on Facebook and say who's doing such a thing, but instead like get out the paper and write down their names and find out because you want to send it to the editor and you want to send it to the writers themselves.
Right.
So because they're going to be the ones that are a little more direct, and tweeting at them is a really great way. Twitter, I'm finding from almost everybody that I know, as far as media, seems to be the quickest way to get noticed and have your story get out there to people you don't know. It
Well,
seems to be like allowed a little
I'll tell you
easier than
why. I
Facebook
can tell you
messaging
why.
someone.
So here's why. So on Facebook, if you're looking at like the New York Times or public radio or whatever, they have a hired person whose job it is to run their social media accounts. But
Yeah.
if you're on Twitter and you like, there's a New Hampshire podcast called Outside In, put out by public radio. The producers of that are on Twitter with their own names, doing their own Twitter accounts.
Mhm.
So if I tweet at the show, I don't get anybody. If I tweet at the writers,
Oh,
that's where I get in. And I don't like Twitter otherwise. That's all I use Twitter for, is mostly that kind of stuff, communicating with those kind of people. So that's what I think is why Twitter is more effective for me than Facebook for reaching out to the media outlets. The other thing I do is, because I make a show about fish, I often will invite writers to come fishing with me or come on an adventure with me and become friends with me. So now I'm friends with all the, like, it turns out the public radio producer for my favorite public radio show, his mother lives down the street from me. In fact, our property is a butt, so we're almost neighbors. Only that you can't walk there straight. So it turns out we're neighbors and we're in the community together, and that helps too, just by making friends with people. And that makes you easy to access when they think, oh, I need one more level to my story.
Yeah.
I know Reba knows how to talk about sex. Let's call her for this next time.
Right. Totally.
So yeah.
That makes me think of it was like 8 years ago, my friend Farnell Newton, he had been getting all this press, and I was just like, how on earth did you get that? And he said, I tweeted the guy.
Exactly.
And I was like, how you're friends with these people? And it seemed really mysterious to me. But the fact is, most of my journalist friends are all just people that hang out in their yeah, totally. Farnell's in Portland, and
Yeah.
it's like most of them are just people who hang out in their house and write. Like,
Well, they're super awkward nerds, right? That's what they are. They're just like us. They don't know how to act in society, so they do a thing that gives them comfort,
yeah,
which is writing or producing shows. So they're
yeah.
just nerds like the rest of us trying to figure it all out. And so when you reach out to them, they're like, someone's nice to
Hey,
me.
what's up?
Yeah.
That guy's nice.
So it makes a big difference.
Yeah,
I got in the New York Times by taking a comedian ice fishing. I
that's
found
cool.
out that, well, I thought he wrote for the Onion. I didn't know he wrote for the Times. But I found out he liked going ice fishing, and he had a summer home in New Hampshire. So I said, well, come up in the wintertime. I'll take you ice fishing. Took him out ice fishing and made a podcast on the ice. And then a few months later, he emails me and he goes, hey, Clay, can I write a story about this for my hometown paper? Now, he lives in Brooklyn, right? So
Right.
I'm like, sure, no problem. And then 6 months later, I get a call from Brooklyn. Hey, Clay, this is Tony from New York Times. Coming tomorrow, take pictures of your ice fishing event stuff you're doing. I'm like, Tony from the New York Times. And then I get text from that comedian. Oh, by the way, my hometown paper is the New York Times. And next thing you know, is a full page Sunday
That's
New York
cool.
Times, and it gets into 162
Yeah.
countries in print. So you don't know. You just don't
No.
know. So be nice to people. Take them
All
out
right.
on adventures.
Our radio station was in the New York Times this last week about the struggling, and my friend Tex, who I'm actually doing a consult with in a half an hour because we're just, I'm helping out the station where I can, was right there, the picture of her, and it was just totally cool
It's
to
so
see X-Ray
fun.
FM, and because we're just talking about that same the concept of like keeping the stations open,
Mhm.
but it's always just kind of exciting. I don't know.
It's just fun.
Yeah,
It's
just
good for it.
fun.
Warms you up a little bit especially when it's not a negative story.
Yeah.
And by the way, the New York Times is the only time I've ever seen a bump in my numbers from being in the media, and a measurable increase in Facebook and Twitter followers and
Yeah.
downloads of my podcast. So not a
Yeah.
huge jump. I mean, we're talking tens of people.
No.
So it
I
doesn't
gotta
translate.
I would say this week, because the FreshBooks podcast, that was the one right here. I've gotten a few ads from that one, a couple, like at least one consult, and then I've gotten a few follows from my mailing list, and that's cool. I'm like, yay, that's positive, because that my goal is to be able to get more consultations. So that worked for me. But yeah, it's gonna be fun, and to see where all this heads and how people are going to be using it more uniquely, because media changes. You also, when there's things like this, it's not the same as it was, and it shifts because of need. And I'm really curious to see what the media landscape looks like in 6 months because of all this that's happening.
Well, I mean, your media, it's going to be on its head.
Yeah, it is
It's
on its
because
head.
it's on its head right now, and so
Yeah,
we're going to see a big change in media, a big change in public education, and a big change in how hospitals
yeah,
are run. So, like, there's a lot of opportunity going to be coming, and we don't know what that opportunity is yet. But all you can
right.
do now is be prepared to turn on a dime, be available,
Hmm.
and then when you get your chance, do it. And Larry just said, always present yourself with with an attitude of gratitude and mean it. Uh,
Yes.
that's really, really important. Saying thank you goes so far. Sending a thank you card goes further. Sending, if you have, a sticker from your show, goes even further.
Yeah.
Larry is on the money, but just don't forget to say thank you, and say
Yeah.
often, and mean it. He's right on the money. I think that's perfect.
All right. So you can check out Clay Groves and go to the Fish Nerds. And Fish Nerds is the name of the
Yeah,
podcast.
fishnerds.com. I'm easy to find.
I'm adding this in the ticker. I should have done this earlier, but it'll be
Yeah,
in the name of it. So,
that's fine.
oh, I forgot the part where I go show. Here we go.
Yay.
So I really appreciate having this chat with you. We'll have you back to do something fun soon.
Yeah. Well,
Because the
this,
cool thing about all these media is I want to do just some fun things I loved, like, that stream yesterday was so much fun, doing the live reading. Not that I can show any of you guys that one because it was really silly,
well,
but that
it's
one's personal.
you're on the money though, Jenny, with that trend of those live readings, because my
Mhm.
local theater is in big trouble
Hannah.
because of
Oh,
this. So
Hannah.
we were
Yeah.
just we just we just produced the show Matilda, and I was in Matilda. We've been practicing for months and months and months, and we got canceled because
Yeah.
of this. So now what we're doing is one of the local newspapers reporters who was the entertainment reporter just got fired from his job. And he wrote a play. So now a bunch of the actors from the play are going to produce that play over Zoom, and I'm going to edit it into an audio drama, which I've never done before. So we get a chance to play. Yeah.
Good example of that is my friend Lindsay Bowen, he was doing the 24-hour plays in New York, all the actors and such, and we were like I saw him at Podfest. He's like, can you retweet it? And it was happening the same day of the big Nielsen talk about podcasting, and they didn't have to cancel it because they did it. Everyone still got onto it. They're still able to get their media, because one of their goals was to try to get more press and kind of start pushing things so that they could get more mentions. And it ended up turning out really, really well. They were still able to do it. If you're not familiar what a 24-hour festival is it's where you write the play and act it out within 24 hours, including all of the music, all of the beats, everything, the script. It's really,
I love that stuff.
Yeah. So I think that when I've done a lot of consults recently with friends in the comedy community who are doing who've already, some of them have already been in podcasting, but like they're losing their studios, and some of the studios are shutting down, and so now they're having to go to online streaming, and people just didn't know quite that move into it. And so I've been helping them kind of navigate it, and we're all kind of learning together about what really works and what doesn't. But it was a blast, because I mean, we had a really nice time, and I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting ways that we connect, and how we'll be able to connect that too.
It's only going to get more interesting. Reba says they'll be live streaming the Mystery Box April 18th because because their stage show got canceled. And Reba also said in here she doesn't fish, but she likes our attitude, so she'll follow along. Now, Reba, if you really want to talk about sex, go listen to my Valentine's special, because we talk about sex deep on that. Fish have all kinds of crazy sex, and we love talking about it. So if you want to get on, and Reba, if you ever want to do a show, I'll be happy to come talk about fish sex, because it's one of my favorite topics.
Oh, you should.
Human sex makes me uncomfortable, but fish, I know how to do that.
Yeah, you guys should connect. Yeah.
So
as I'm starting to get red again, I'm like,
fish sex.
I think that's a good note to end. If you are watching this live, Friday, I'll be going at 1:00, kind of talking about and showing you some of the templates I've used to be able to give some of these one sheets, and sort of going through some of the press releases and talking about that a little. So that's going to be the workshop for Friday. And then I'm going to be posting this afternoon. I'm posting all the old videos to YouTube. So if you aren't following yet, go to search Gritty Birds. That's GRITTY space birds over at YouTube, because I'm trying to get to that 100. I just hadn't been pushing YouTube for a long time, but I really don't want it to say / anymore. I think I've said that twice. Now I like this though.
Blah, blah, blah. That's a science term. Yeah.
It's a science term.
Yeah. Don't bog us down with details. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you should be able to just go click to the next one to be able to get to that. So looking forward to all of the next ones. And thank you, Clay.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's fun.
Much. It's always good to see your face.
Oh, you too. It's always fun. Always fun and blast. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think we're going to just end the broadcast.
Okay.
Right, take care.
Bye.